Have you ever wondered if we've got this whole hidden energetic architecture operating right underneath our physical anatomy? Like a completely separate map of the human body? Well, welcome back, Focus learners. Today's explainer is taking us deep into a really fascinating historical and mystical framework, the 12 psychic centers of Rosicrucian tradition. We're going to be neutrally unpacking exactly what this specific source material claims, how it conceptualizes the energy inside us, and the incredibly strict rules it places around accessing this ancient knowledge. It's a completely different way of looking at ourselves, so let's see how this tradition puts all the puzzle pieces together. Okay, let's dive into this, because the source text definitely does not ease us gently into the topic. It kicks off with a pretty striking caution. The author claims that unguided exploration of these psychic centers, and I quote, may be dangerous to their physical well-being, psychological balance, and spiritual evolution. To really understand this text, we've got to understand why it treats this info with such massive gravity. The tradition basically argues that experimenting with these centers without the proper manual is literally playing with potent energetic forces. So, the text explicitly warns against purely speculative books and self-proclaimed gurus. The source suggests that anyone out there offering commercialized, personal interpretations isn't just misleading people, they could actively harm sincere students who don't know the proper protocols. To navigate all of this, here is the roadmap for our explainer. First, esoteric knowledge and risks. Second, comparing centers and chakras. Third, the 12 psychic centers. Fourth, physical versus psychic counterparts. And finally, mystical methods of development. Part 1. Esoteric knowledge and risks, the dangers of unregulated speculation. So, to truly grasp where this tradition is coming from, we have to look at how it views its own authority. There's a really sharp contrast drawn here between commercial, speculative gurus and what the text calls initiative orders. According to the source, a true initiate would never ever teach genuine psychic development in some mass-market paperback. Instead, this esoteric knowledge is viewed as a sacred, unbroken lineage. The text claims it's a complete theoretical and practical synthesis of mystical laws, bequeathed over centuries exclusively within an initiative order, like Amorc, for example. The fundamental distinction the author is making is that this ancient wisdom is meant to be fiercely protected and passed down, not treated as a commercial enterprise or some weekend hobby. Part 2. Comparing centers and chakras, bridging Western and Eastern esotericism. Now, what's really interesting about this concept is how it connects its highly specific Western terminology to ideas that might actually be super familiar to you from Eastern philosophies. The source emphasizes that there is absolutely no fundamental difference between the Rosicrucian concept of psychic centers and the Indian and Tibetan traditions regarding chakras, which, by the way, are sometimes beautifully referred to as the centers of the lotus. The author points out that this is purely a matter of linguistics and cultural lenses. Whether you're viewing it through the metaphor of a blooming rose in the West or a lotus in the East, the claim is that they are describing the exact same energetic map and the exact same esoteric anatomy. So what exactly is the day-to-day function of these centers? Well, the text defines them by their primary role regarding psychic energy. It states that these centers are charged with accumulating and propagating psychic energy throughout our entire being. And crucially, this is a big one, it claims this energy is carried by the cosmic essence contained in the air. I want you to just think about your own breath for a second. According to this framework, you aren't just taking in oxygen, you're pulling in a literal cosmic essence. This intimate tie to our breathing patterns explains, according to the source, why so many ancient traditional yoga exercises focus so heavily on positive, deep breathing. The claim is that those techniques were originally conceived entirely to awaken these exact psychic centers by harnessing the very air we breathe. Moving to part 3. The 12 psychic centers, the esoteric anatomy. Listen, if you're going to map out an invisible, energetic system, you have to be meticulous, right? And the Rosicrucian tradition doesn't just offer vague guidelines. It claims to have mapped out this esoteric anatomy with incredible precision, identifying exactly 12 distinct psychic centers located throughout the human body. They didn't just guess here. The text presents this as a rigorously tested framework passed down through generations. Let's look at exactly how this tradition organizes and locates these 12 pivotal centers of energy. The text systematically divides this map into 7 major centers and 5 minor ones, naming each after a physical counterpart so the student can actually visualize the locations. Spanning from the top of the body downward, the 7 major centers begin up in the head with the pineal center and the pituitary center. Moving down the throat and upper chest, we hit the thyroid center and the thymic center. The system then reaches the vital core with the heart center, before settling deeper into the torso with the solar center, which is linked to the solar plexus, and finally the adrenal center, corresponding to the adrenal glands. It's basically a geographical journey straight down the most critical glands and organs of the human body. Let's move to and see how this builds with the 5 minor centers, which flow through these supporting organs of the lower body. We've got the splenic or splenetic center, corresponding to the spleen, the pancreatic center, linked to the pancreas, the hepatic center, mapping out the liver, the renal center, connected to the kidneys, and finally, grounding the whole system, the ovarian or testicular center. By overlaying these 12 centers right onto major biological landmarks, the tradition creates this comprehensive bridge between the physical shell we all know and the invisible, esoteric anatomy it claims is operating within us. Part 4. Physical versus psychic counterparts, defining the boundaries. So, the crucial point is understanding the boundary between the physical and the mystical within this framework. This is arguably the most vital conceptual distinction the source makes. The text insists on a very strict definition. A psychic counterpart is the psychic equivalent of a physical organ, gland, or plexus. But, and this is key, it is entirely distinct from the physical matter itself. Think of it like a smartphone. Your physical organ, say your heart or your thyroid, is the hardware. You can touch it, a doctor can measure it, but the psychic center, that's the invisible Wi-Fi signal passing through it. They occupy the exact same space, and they share a name just to keep things simple, but the psychic center is absolutely not the physical gland itself. One is completely tangible, and the other is purely energetic. In this boundary between the hardware and the Wi-Fi dictates the absolute strictest rule of the entire tradition. Because the center isn't made of physical matter, the text states bluntly, it is absolutely impossible to develop these centers by practical or artificial means. According to the source, no amount of deadlifts at the gym and no highly specialized esoteric diet is going to make your pineal psychic center any stronger. You literally cannot awaken them through physical gymnastics, and you can't stimulate them by taking certain physical substances. The physical realm simply cannot directly manipulate the non-physical counterpart. It just doesn't work that way. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Mystical Methods of Development, the Traditional Approach. Okay, so that leaves us with a pretty massive elephant in the room. If we can't use physical means, if diets, supplements, and extreme physical exercises are totally useless for this specific goal, according to the text, how on earth are these psychic centers actually developed within this tradition? And this brilliantly illustrates the whole framework, because the tradition relies entirely on what it calls mystical methods. It specifically lists 3 authorized techniques. Number 1, visualization. Number 2, positive deep breathing. And number 3, the intonation of certain vowel sounds. When you think back to the definition of these centers, these methods suddenly make perfect logical sense. Remember, these centers rely on that cosmic essence carried in the air. Therefore, focused breath, targeted mental visualization, and the specific vibrations created by vowel sounds are literally the only keys that fit the lock. These are the purely non-physical tools the text claims will progressively and safely awaken the centers without causing those dangerous imbalances we were warned about at the very beginning of the explainer. Which leaves us with a really lingering, profound question based on these teachings. Are we tapping into the cosmic essence in the air with every single breath we take? The Rosicrucian tradition certainly argues that we are, whether we realize it or not. It's a deeply fascinating perspective on human potential and our esoteric anatomy. Thank you so much for joining me for this structured explainer of the 12 psychic centers, and keep exploring the incredible, diverse concepts that shape how humanity attempts to understand itself. Catch you next time.